Welcome to Circle Around. On this podcast, we hope to see, analyze, reflect, and respond better to our context by asking meaningful questions that lead to better questions. Our conversation is aimed at helping believers make sense of their world and then reimagine a new way of responding faithfully with full presence to the challenges of our urban society. We are your hosts, Lusanda and Mahlatse Mashua. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoy this episode. So I'm drawn to the incarnation and its significance to how it talks about the nearness of God to me. You know, one of Jesus' names is Emmanuel, God with us. Yeah. And incarnation is a big theological word, but it just means exactly that, God coming down to be with us, God coming near. And so I love that because it just tells us that God didn't just stay in heaven and watch everything from above and didn't offer a solution only and stay aloof, but he came to be with us in our joy, in our pain, our longing for hope, in our disappointment, and in our deepest longing for purpose. And we live in a broken world, you know, but that broken world got visited by God. And so we're here again just wanting to find ways of grabbing onto that wholeness and shalom, knowing very well that our God knows how to sit with our pain and with our longing as well. But Mahlatse, I wanted to start by asking you, where have you seen the brokenness of the world this week?
Seeing corruption, I think, particularly in the form of, or where resources that are meant to help, you know, people who are desperate, people who are hungry, people who've lost their jobs during, you know, this pandemic, people who belong, I guess, to the vulnerable groups in our communities. When I see those resources being redirected unjustly, as I've seen this week, to you know, for selfish reason towards people who don't need them but are greedy. That breaks me. That broke me this week. And when I see, you know, us coming, you know, society and almost like we're shocked about these things, or the same people who are doing it coming to express the shock about it, that even makes it worse. You know, not only are we corrupt, but we are dishonest about our corruption. Seeing that really broke me this week.
Yeah, and where would you say you've seen a breaking through of shalom?
I think that when unjust behavior is being called out, as I've been hearing on social media, especially with regards to this conversation on gender-based violence, and seeing how more men in my circles are starting to see it as an act of grace. That when sin is exposed, that it is an act of grace calling us towards repentance, because I think there can be nothing worse than you going on the wrong path and there's nothing that tells you that you are going on that wrong path, and you just keep going on that. So I think these calling out, you know, messages, I'm not your imboto, that shocks us, or conversations with you around, you know, what Women's Month is, or you know, the statistics when as they've been shown to us about what gender-based violence means, that seeing men in my circles, I think, respond better than we have before. Seeing us respond better than we have, I think that's shalom, because in a sense shalom speaks about how God intends things to be. And so whenever there's like there's a calling out, there's a rebuke, there's a correction, or there's even a flag that says this is wrong in the world, that is an invitation, at least an act of grace that invites us towards righteousness.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think I appreciate that so much, because we've just had a conversation now where I was sharing with you about some of the mixed feelings I have about August. And I think you obviously heard what I said in terms of how it makes me feel, and you know, all of the different aspects. But I'd love to hear what Women's Month means for you.
So up until now, it's been about honoring and celebrating, the women in my life, appreciating the role that they play. Then part of our culture is to recognize those who've come before you, and then putting a spotlight. I thought Women's Month is also about putting a spotlight on women, particularly in their role in forging a path, and building or putting in place some of the important, pillars in our society that allows me to enjoy the kind of society today, at least, that I can enjoy. So, for instance, thinking about, the origins of, Women's Day, and thinking about some of the as part of the larger struggle narrative in South Africa. When Mama Winnie passed away, one of the things that was highlighted was the erasure of women in the struggle narrative, right? Whenever we think about the struggle narratives, there's been a broader erasure of women's roles in that, and so I think it was from there that things began to change for me in terms of understanding and appreciating. So Women's Day was also about a way in which I get to appreciate the role that women have played in forging winning some of the freedoms that we enjoy in South Africa today. But it has also been quite distant. So it has also been about celebrating outwardly what you women have done, and not really an opportunity for me to reflect about me in particular. It's also been, and I confess, I think I also have been part of, those who feel comfortable with the patterns, the pillars, the tools, the framing of Women's Day that where we come out during this time. And I would have probably put up a statement, if I hadn't had a conversation with you about how we support women during this time, and maybe just thought about some of the few things that challenge women, and just say, look guys, we celebrate women, but let's remember these things. We need to do better. Sort of those kind of messages, which are important, I think, but I think without necessarily seeing myself in that conversation.
That's very good. That leads me to my next question, because often whenever we talk about patriarchy or toxic masculinity or sexism, most men would likely think about this as talking about the men over there, those men, right? And so the picture of those men there are the problem. But you seem to have had a journey where you're a little bit more introspective and bringing the story home. What was your wake-up moment? I mean, are there conversations that you've had or actual things that you've done or you've experienced that made you think, oh, wait a minute?
Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't describe it as like I was bad and then I had a wake-up moment and then I'm good.
Okay, it's good.
I think I have these wake-up moments. That help me to get better in one particular area. Okay. And so there are many waking up moments that I can describe. But let me describe one that happened a few years ago that allowed me to at least to move closer towards understanding myself and speaking less just only about this as other men, but thinking about myself. And the irony of the story, you'll understand as I share it. I think so. I was dropping out two girls at school, two oldest, and at school. And as we were driving, it was actually during the week where there was an outcry. That was sort of expressed as, am I next? Women asking themselves, having looked at some of the gruesome murders that had taken place. Women were murdered just doing the everyday things, the mundane things, going to the post office, walking from lectures, right? And so women were asking the question, am I next? Because you don't have to be in any exceptional circumstance even to be a victim. It's just, you just live in South Africa and you are, and so the question was, am I next? And I remember though, at that time, to be honest, I had a bit of a dismissive attitude towards the question and the lament. Maybe just it was distant from me. Let me put it this way. I didn't see it as, I saw it as an exaggeration at the time. But we're driving in a car with the two girls at the back, and you know, at the time they're 5 and 3, and we're having some amazing conversations. And in the background there was the newsreader. SFM came on. I thought, well, the SFM is always on, and there was a newsreader who was faintly starting to read the news in the background, saying. And I could hear it saying, look, the next story that I'm about to share contains, you know, violence, and it has, it's not suitable for children and sensitive viewers. And so hearing that, I reached over to the volume dial, and I turned it down, the volume, gradually, but eventually switching off, you know, the news, the radio altogether. And Maisha asked me the question, Papa, why did you turn that off? And I tried to sort of explain to them that the story that they were about to share on radio, you know, they said contains violence and that it wasn't suitable for children. And Maisha then started to make the connection between all the billboards that she'd been reading, because the stories had been on the billboards.
Yeah, the news
correct.
Things on
particularly the story about how a girl, I think she was age 6, I think, if I'm not mistaken, had been kidnapped from just outside her school. Maisha had read that. Yeah. And so she started asking me, is it that story? Papa, were they going to tell the story about the girl that got stolen?
Taken. Yeah.
Right, that got stolen, as if she expressed it, from her school. And it shocked me, because at one end, I thought to myself, look, I had the privilege of being able to reach over to the volume dial and turn down the violence that could visit my children. You know, there was violence and it was going to visit my children, and I could simply just reach out and turn down, the dial and switch off that violence. And I started thinking, man, there are fathers, parents out there who are unable, who don't have that dial, right? That they live in a context where violence actually is in the home. It lives with them, and there's no volume dial to turn it down. But then I just thought that even in that situation where I thought I had protected them from violence, I hadn't really protected them from violence. And Maisha now was interrogating, you know, me on this sort of superficial way of protecting them from violence. And she's now asking me the question,
did you see
about this girl, Papa, why did this girl get taken? Why did this girl, you know, what did the people who stole this girl want to do with this girl? And man, I just didn't have the language to explain it to them. And I remember just choking my way through trying to explain that. And then she asked the question, Papa, will they steal us? And immediately she asked that question, I recognized the framing of it. Am I next?
Am I next?
She was asking me, am I next? And all of a sudden, a question that I thought, it's a question out there that those women are exaggerating about, you know, that not all of us have the same kind of fears and same questions, and all of us live in different proximity towards a problem, I'd sort of worked my way into being dismissive about it, and yet it had found its way into my personal private space. And I thought I should know better as a Christian, because I should not only care about it when it's my daughter, my wife, my sister, that I should care about it because God cares about it, because it affects human beings, it affects God's world, and I shouldn't have to take my daughters asking me this question for me to actually understand and care enough about these issues and to listen, to understand. And so that day I thought, you know what, it took me a step closer into not seeing it only as a problem for that other men out there have, but that the problem is also here, how I understand these issues and how I respond as well. And I should actually start by interrogating myself and how I respond to these things.
That's so good. That's so good. I think that's the thing about it, hey, is that it's a really personal and raw moments that actually make you wake up. And so another thing that I wanted to get into is it's often difficult, right? It's a hard balance all the time when you have to think about experiencing oppression in one sense, but at the other side, you also have to be aware that there are some ways you might be experiencing privilege in another area of your identity, and I think that's probably some of the conversation that that you're having with yourself as a man and with other men as well, and obviously recognizing your oppression can come a little bit more easy, but seeing your privilege is another. What are the ways that you have had to do that work of waking up to some of the privilege that you have just by being in a male body?
Lysandra, look, the reality is that me being male, I guess, in society, there are certain things I don't have to think about. Some of which I only get to think about when I hear women reflecting on their pain and their painful experiences, right? I don't have to worry. A lot of the time, I'm not even thinking about what do I have to do to prevent myself from being raped. I don't have to worry about harassment in public.
Yeah, that's very good.
But also, I have the benefit, and sometimes earlier on I didn't realize this, but I have the benefit of being believed in certain church spaces. When I point out, certain things that I've been advised by women to point out, when I consider how those women would not be received in those spaces.
And they probably advise you
right?
because they know that if they say it.
But I think a part of, I guess, the male privilege is that there is a sense of leadership. You're given the benefit of doubt when people consider you playing a leadership role. So you can be an automatic leader in certain spaces because a lot of spaces already considers men as leaders, even if they don't qualify, or even if they don't have characteristics, or even if they're going to lead people who have greater leadership skills than them, for instance.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of all of those.
Yeah, that's good. And how do you think it's been important for you in your whether it's in your friendships or just for you personally to be able to name that this is male privilege now at play?
Yeah, so we can't change what we can't see, what we can't name. I think it's difficult to. And so reading up, having conversations, learning about what it is. Like I said, sometimes it's difficult to see it because it's your world. It's just a normal way in which you're framed.
Yeah.
When we go home, whether we visit your house or we visit my house.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
There's a code of conduct, isn't there?
There's an expectation where if I sat down, the whole time and I just relaxed in front of the TV and I did nothing, cleaning wise or, washing dishes or preparing meals or anything. If I just sat down and I was just served the entire time, right, which is nice, then that wouldn't be seen as bad. I would actually not. Yeah. That's expected.
In my
right?
context, you expected. In fact, everyone else arranges to prepare.
Correct.
For you to be there.
Yeah.
To be served.
Because I'm a guy, it's fine. Yeah. It's expected for me not to do much in that sense, to be served. But then if you did that, if you arrive, you feel the pressure to. There's an expectation for you to wait on people.
Your husband.
And your husband.
I've got to also perform
correct.
that, even if I don't do that in our own house.
Correct.
But we've got to perform those things.
You don't do that in the house. but you have to, yes.
I'm saying, when we're at home, boo-boo, I don't do that.
We have to play that role.
I have to do that. I have to play that role.
But if you were to sit down and do the exact same thing that I was doing, you'd be seen as lazy or dishonoring or, And
we have interesting conversations on our way back home.
Yes, we do. Yeah, so So there's that sense in which we have different expectations that I play.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your answer about how you saw yourself in that story with Maisha, and that wake up call. We do tend to see violence as something over there, right? Like you said, you saw the outcry of the women. It's the women over there. They're overreacting over there. There also tends to be this thing where whenever a person, like a man, does something to a woman, we go and exceptionalize them and we interrogate just them, right? Why did he do it? He was a lone wolf. He wasn't well, and almost wanting to individualize the problem and silo it down to that one person, as opposed to ignore the whole system that actually makes this whole thing possible, right? So how can you help us to critically reflect on the structural drivers that actually make this like that man and many other men who do that possible, right? Whether it's communities that are broken down and substance abuse and whatever else, things happening in family dynamics. I mean, what are some of those things that form an ecosystem for that kind of for that kind of reality?
Yes, sure. So we can often demonize the individual, while failing, like you said, to critically reflect on the systemic,
the entire thing,
right?
yeah.
And it's important for us to not only think about when it's happened, but what are the things that enable it, what the things that create, the things that enable it, the things that are meant to stop it, but they don't stop it. That's really important. I think we can, from a cultural, we've got the religious space as well. We've got that give us these ideological drivers. So ideas, for instance, that frames me as a man as somebody who's an owner of bodies, women's bodies, for instance, that's contained in many different cultural ideological frameworks, in some theologies as well. In the church space, not only in the church space in terms of Christianity, but in other religions as well.
Institutions,
but also those that are not necessarily religious as well. I think ones that particularly fail to justify inherent dignity and worth can tend to themselves prioritize other things, a sense of consumerism, which may also reflect itself as justifying a relationship with a woman that's based on just a taking, a consuming. But I can remember, Lusanda, that even in, on our wedding day, I still remember that with such fondness. I know that you always, go back to the fact that I didn't cry when you walked down.
You didn't cry?
When you walked down.
You didn't cry?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
And that's because I was overwhelmed. Okay.
Oh.
I was very overwhelmed.
Okay.
When something is overwhelmed,
Yeah,
you cry,
okay.
but when it's. But.
I still want us to do that.
Let me fast forward then from that moment to
Yeah.
later on that day when the ceremony was done, and we were receiving the different types of advices, right? The
Yes,
speeches,
yes,
right?
yes.
During the speeches, I still remember the speeches that I got.
Yes.
Had more to do with it was a social high five. Well done, you got the babe.
Got one.
Yeah,
You got
this is a
one.
good one. Well done.
got
It
it.
was like granny after granny and aunt, and they were just saying congratulations to me. And then for you, though, it was this advice that was given to you that was almost the same script actually, speaker after speaker. Lusanda, emshadweni kuyabekezelwa. In a marriage, you persevere. Long suffering, you must be patient.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was that was given to you, that was said to you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it would have made sense if it was said to both of us, because I think we understand that a marriage takes work. It's an amazing institution.
Yeah.
We love it. We enjoy
Covenant, this relationship.
But you have to. It takes a lot of work to build a marriage and a friendship within a marriage, and it requires patience, and it's also more you towards me. But on that day, you were the one being told that.
I have to be patient.
And we've seen this.
Yeah.
We've seen this script, right? Play many times over, where there's an expectation that is put on women to say, okay, it's almost like they were saying, Lusanda Mahlatse is going to mess up. Mahlatse has a right to mess up and not be questioned about, the difficulties that he's going to bring. Your role.
Yeah.
He'll be just doing what he's expected to do.
Because he's here.
Right?
He got you.
That's right.
He did his part.
That's it. But your role in that is to persevere.
Yeah.
And what's worse about that is that advice continues long after the wedding.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in cases where there's gender-based violence, where, say, a husband is physically abusing his wife, and his wife then goes back to her family, right, and leaves and goes to the family. And when she gets there, the advice is given, listen, we know that what's happening is bad and it's terrible. We feel sorry for you. However, emshadweni, kuyabekezelwa, right, you should go back. And so she's then pushed back to go to the home of the abuser. Yeah. So she's not safe in that home, but she's not safe back, and so she has nowhere to go. In fact, this week I saw, somebody that we know who was sharing their appreciation that when they went home, that they were received.
They weren't asked questions.
They were received. They were made to feel safe. Why is that an exceptional story? Because we know that what is normal is that when you go home, you're pushed back.
You're pushed
back.
back.
The fact that the husband is abusing you or is made it unsafe for you is an issue. So these are some of the issues that are difficult to talk about because they touch on some of our sacred cows. Yeah. Right? Because if we talk about culture, we're still reeling from this, this injustice that was done again through colonialism, where culture was dismissed. Yeah. And so there can be sometimes an uncritical embrace of all things, under the umbrella of culture, because we don't want to do the same thing that was done, by the colonialists, colonizers, with regards to committing cultural injustice. But actually, we need to talk about some of the problematic issues within our traditions, our traditional and cultural.
Because cultures are also developed by humans, right? And who make mistakes and who could see things in part.
That's right. And then also in our religious spaces, sometimes it's difficult for us to speak about how religion can play a role or plays a role in upholding, creating and upholding injustice. And the reason is because I think we think that it would be irreverent of us. Somehow maybe we would be speaking against God. But actually, when we look at how God acts in the Bible, we look at how Jesus acts in the Bible, it seems that what we do more is actually we end up, by refusing to speak about these things, we end up actually doing the text injustice. We end up framing God unjustly. And so I see a lot of women who say things like, I don't find myself, in the text. How is this a story about me and my experience? I don't find my experience. In fact, I see these problem texts that people, read over, that people don't see. And I see women who have been, who find themselves a lot in a situation where men in power abuse their authority to gain, say, sexual favors. For instance, they listen to how we preach about David, and Bathsheba, and say, look, she seduced him. Yeah. And so they read that story and they hear how we preach about it, and how do they feel safe? And how do they feel safe? This is a text that's used to say, well, we should actually question the victims. Yeah. We should lay blame on the victims. And so that's how they experience this text. And so there are ways in which we preach the text as well that actually drive this, because not only do women feel that way, it can empower and embolden those men to not see the problem, to not see themselves as the problem, for us not to see ourselves as a problem. So even when, for instance, I've heard sermons where, rape is spoken of in terms of something that's happened to someone.
Yeah.
And so obviously the solution then, if you frame it that way, is to think about what that person was doing, where they were, so that you can prevent rape from happening to them. But if, rape is a violation of a woman's bodily integrity and autonomy, that's given to her, something that is sacred, given by God, then it's somebody who's violating that we need to be looking at. Then our solutions are geared towards the violator, for instance. But I think some of the ways in which we preach about what these things are, particularly gender-based violence, in a narrow sense, it can drive gender-based violence from our text. There's also ways in which we don't talk about the economic disadvantages of women. In our society.
Which is part of why sometimes they get taken back home, because now she's going to be an economic burden. No, that's your economic place. So you get taken care of there. Sometimes that's a driver.
Yeah, which is why you cannot. I think you can't say you have a solution until you've also addressed the economic disadvantages. Right. Again, it ranges from, on one side, women getting paid less than men for doing the same job, or even more, right? It ranges from that to all the way to women being dependent on men to provide for them financially, which means that they always have to negotiate, their well-being in that sense, and think, what is it going to cost me?
What's it going to cost me? What's it going to cost
if
my
I
children?
leave? I mean, this week. Last week, we were speaking to a woman who was a survivor of gender-based violence, and she said for 11 years she stayed in a marriage because of her children. She didn't know how she was going to provide for her children, but she stayed in that marriage even though she was being abused. And eventually, she got the courage, to leave when there was a glimmer of hope that at least they'll be able to eat. That the children will be able to eat. And so we have to talk about, the economic side of things as well, that there are economic drivers. It's ideological, there are economic drivers, but then there are also these institutions that are set up to also sort of create this environment. But there's also things like silence as well. I think silence
on
is
the part
as
of
a men. Silence on men. But I think everybody, but I would focus on men in particular. When we demonize, the individual and not the system, we don't see some of the things which are not at the end side of things, that when you talk about gender-based violence, like this man, was the one who perpetrated this gender-based violence. He was, he had a deviant, behavior, sexual interest and preoccupation. This man was abused himself, and fatherless generation. We talk about, but you don't talk about those who are around, who are silent about it. Those
in terms of his context that makes him like that.
Correct. Or those who see it but don't say anything or don't do something about it. That eventually leads to failing victims. And so you can talk about the role of the way we tell the stories, right? So the media, for instance, when they tell the stories, will tell us what grabs our imagination as well. And so we will hear the facts. This is the woman. She was this. This was her age. This was her trajectory of her life. And these are the gruesome details of her
death,
torture and death and so forth. And they do this. So imagine if also in the media we got told in detail how men were silent, didn't speak out when they heard, these jokes being made, the sexist jokes being made.
That led up to
that minimizes, violence against women, for instance. Imagine if we're told the horror of the silence or the silent men. These men actually, set and made a man who was a known perpetrator of gender-based violence. They set and made him comfortable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All the horror of that context.
Maybe because he was rich and nobody spoke out against him. Something like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the horror, I'm saying, just showing how bad that is.
Yeah.
All the horror of the advice that Lusanda was given, on a wedding day. This is part of the violence, guys. This is part of this expectation.
Sure.
Oh, look how a woman was passed for a job, that she was very qualified for, in favor of a man. Look how horrible this is. That sort of thing. I mean, imagine if that's also the way in which we told, rather than the stuff that easily catch our attention, because all of these things speak to the statistics. Okay. And there's sometimes there's a difference, that we have a different relationship, to the stories versus the statistics. We forget that the numbers actually translate into people. It's easier for me to relate to the story that tells me the detail of her age and her life and the trajectory of her life and that sort of thing, than when I look at a number. But those numbers represent stories of people with ages, with trajectories in life as well. So I think it's the way we also tell our stories that's important, something that we need to interrogate.
That's powerful. I mean, what you're basically sharing with these things is that this is not just an academic exercise. It can't be just an academic exercise. It can't be just, like you're saying, posturing and naming things. It's not just naming that one person, but this is an issue that affects all of us, and it's a justice issue, that gender-based violence, oppression of women, and this the way in which and the setup of patriarchy is a justice issue, because it deals with how humans leave an imprint on each other, and how it leaves a texture on other human beings. And I mean, how do you begin to just address this dichotomy between the Bible being used to oppress and to agree and to sit comfortably with those things, right? Yeah. But then also the Bible being a liberating text. How do you make sense of those two things?
So I think that, as you've spoken, when the Bible is used as a text, as a tool for oppression, it is often in itself, or the usage is a commentary on the ability of the human heart to take something that is sacred, something that is good, something that is sacred, and to use it for its own agendas. Yeah. So I think what it is you find that we as people are able to take stuff that is really good and abuse it, and some of those abuses, are laid bare when we consider how the text has justified, or even sometimes create, or just at least sustained, these injustices towards women. Because sometimes we quote scripture, right, to justify injustice, often not even looking at how some of the ways in which we're using scripture would be a rebuke to Jesus Christ himself. Yeah. Because you look at the person of Christ, and then you see, what a man. He comes into a culture that considers women as second-class citizens. Right? Some of the prayers that were being prayed, thank God that, I'm a man. Firstly, thank God I'm a Jew, not a Gentile. I'm a human being. Yeah. Right? Rather than a dog, I'm a man rather than a woman. In that order, right? Or I'm free rather than a slave. Sure. Right? And then woman last. So in that order. And so you come into that context, and you then he starts to contradict some of the ways in which women are treated, or some of the ways in which it's accepted that women should be treated this way based on how they're perceived. This is their place in society. Then Jesus honors them. Jesus honors women. He respects them. He's not afraid to lose a public debate against a woman.
Against a woman.
In this culture, right? He smiles when he does. When a woman shines in rhetorical flourish.
Hey, flourish.
Right? In an issue, hey? Jesus smiles.
Come on.
And he's happy. His ego hasn't taken a hit. He advocates for women being educated theologically, when women are not supposed, they have no place in theological education in this time. When women are thought as people who should be in the background, they are leading, playing a role. In fact, if you study Matthew and Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and see how women are being portrayed, you start to see how it's incredible, especially in Luke. There's a portrayal of the failure of men who are close to Jesus in understanding him, in worshiping him, in serving alongside him selflessly. And then there's a sharp contrast. Luke especially brings it out. Women are serving selflessly. They worship him perfectly, or at least the way that they're supposed to. And they play a prominent role ultimately in being the messengers, the first messengers, the ones that are entrusted in announcing that justice has broken through, that the kingdom has been inaugurated, the greatest rescue mission, right? It's portrayed, that women are entrusted with this message. So you see a stark interest, a stark difference, in the way Jesus applies himself, challenges injustice, but also recognizes the intellect, the value, the worth of women, and seeks to also remove some of the social barriers that women face in his time. You see that difference between that and we in the church, what we do. We're not experienced that way. Another way is when we think about this word feminist in the church, I think it breaks me sometimes when I think about some of the things in which feminists articulate the very things which Jesus was doing.
Cared about.
Yeah. But because there's a way in which feminists can be compartmentalized. Those feminists, feminists,
angry women,
women who are trying to say women should be in power in a position of power over men. Again, a limited understanding.
That binary of power again.
Exactly, a limited understanding of what it is, some of the key messages, some of the key ideas and concepts. It ends up being like this. You end up finding some things called feminist theologians. So when men do theology,
it's just theology.
It's theology. Right? And then when
a woman does theology from a woman's point of view,
it's called feminist theology. And then some of us, talking about male privilege, we read feminist theologians. Then we come and we preach, but because we're men, we now cross over from feminist theology
to the normal world.
Right, to the normal world. And then we preach the same things and we get all sorts of amens.
Yeah, and you get your badges. You get your Sure.
In fact, we might be treated as bringing something incredibly new into this space.
To the normal world. Yeah. I mean, you've gone into something that I obviously cared about, and I wanted to ask you already, which is how, you've just described to me how you would see Jesus subverting the way in which women get made invisible, the way in which women's experiences don't really find voice. We don't see them, but you've shown me how Jesus subverts and undermines all of that. And I would want to know, what should that call from you as a man? So now when you experience that Jesus, because that's what I was saying in the one before, that we know that Jesus, we love that Jesus, he has loved us. Now, with the way that you've just given me this powerful picture of that Jesus, what does that challenge you to bear witness to and to be as a man? What does that ask of you as a man?
It asks me to make sure, to ask the question, where am I participating in structures of injustice, in systems and structures that give me an advantage as a man, but that's built off injustice towards women, framing them unjustly. So I remember the first time we had this conversation, honest conversation in our own home. I'd grown up in a space where it was patriarchal. Everything is structured around the male experience, right? As a leader, and men go out to make the money
To make the food,
and
they eat
women
first.
women are at home, and they do these chores, cleaning and laundry. But my father was sort of a contradiction within.
That
at least showed some, let me just say,
Yeah, yeah.
some aspects,
Yeah.
some contradictory elements, right, in the story.
But
because
Papa is very different.
Because my dad used them up, and I saw my dad cleaning, and it was, even though in my context he was considered as someone who was bewitched. That my mom had bewitched my dad.
It takes bewitching, right?
That's right.
To just clean your
to
own
clean
home.
your own space. That's right, for a man to do it. And but I learned that was okay to clean, and so when we and to cook, and to do these things. So when we got married, we theologically we understood, at least theologically, our understanding was that, and culturally as well, strong culturally, was that you're meant to cook.
Yeah.
You're meant to
and
clean,
I was ready for that,
and that
right?
you were meant to do well. You chased me out of the kitchen the first time I came into the kitchen. So I came into the kitchen because I thought we were going to do this together. It was the first day. We just moved into our flat.
I'm there to perform everything that I'd been taught.
But
I've got to be the domestic goddess. I've got to, my potty, everything. I'm going to iron. I can't iron, but I tried it.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm here to perform all the things that I'm supposed to do.
And
then what happened?
But
and
I
then
was
you're
sitting
like,
there. But I was sitting there initially thinking, but I can do this.
Yeah, and
I want to do this. I actually know how to do this. But then I thought, okay, let me not, because theologically and culturally this is wrong.
Yeah.
Right? From in terms of what we had learned.
Yeah.
But after a few months, you're very tired.
Yeah.
But I started to get comfortable, I guess, because
because I'm like I'm gonna cook a meal. No, just sit there.
Yeah.
I'll bring it.
Yes.
I'll bring
We'll
the
go
meal.
out, do the same work on campus, come back, and then you get into the kitchen. I'll pull up a chair, and then it was like, oh, it's time to watch the TV.
And then I think when was it? Was it like on month 4, month 3?
Yeah, you're like,
yeah, I'm good.
I'm tired. I'm tired.
And you come make your own food. You're like, oh, but guys, I don't do this. I'm like, no, I can't either.
But then what I realized that what we did was we then tried to keep our cultural and theological framework, language-wise, even though we were starting to change.
Yeah, I remember.
We said, look, we've got to do what's practical, what allows us both to thrive, to keep this household together, as you said.
Yeah.
But then because there was an allegiance to a theological language,
and to the language,
and to a cultural kind of framework, we said, oh no, Lusanda, it means this is your role, but you're just actually outsourcing
delegating
it to me,
delegating that's what he said.
But you're still the one who is responsible for making sure that it has happened, that I have done it. And the same thing,
we tried,
but what I'm saying is it was this struggle because there was an allegiance to a framework, even though clearly it's not what we were living. So I think what it calls us to do is, as we did, eventually we sat down and said, let's be honest. This is what it is, because we do what we believe.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. What is it that we actually believe? And we had to review
review our ideas
and audit
about
it. Right. and start digging deeper. And that led us to obviously different parts and different ways of understanding those portions of Scripture. But what I'm saying is we have to be honest and understand our allegiances towards our religious and our cultural
constructs.
Correct, and we have to audit them continuously, and especially where they're not being practical. And I say practical, I mean it in a sense of if we keep thinking that the way we're applying this word is the way that God intended it, but women experience our spaces unjustly, we've got to ask ourselves, where's the disconnect?
Where's
rather
the
than
lie?
keep doing injury to the image of God.
Okay, that's good.
Rather than keep on doing imagery to the word of God.
Injury
right?
to the word,
Because there is this text and there's a scriptural data here that we can point to. But then we also have the way in which we have history in which we've reflected and taught the text, the scriptural data.
Yeah.
Sometimes in trying to protect our reflections, which are not infallible.
Yeah.
This, we can maintain this is infallible, but our reflections of it are not.
Yeah, they
but
come
sometimes we
loaded
confuse
already.
the two.
Yeah.
And then what we want to do then is protect our reflections, our historical reflections sometimes. Not that they're not important. It's good to learn, from the great traditions of the church. But when we then make them, when we canonize our doctrine, when we canonize our own reflection at the expense of the text and expense of
this person.
Exactly, then we do injustice not only to the word here, but obviously to Jesus Christ and the image of the man that he is.
I want us to get to the practical of it, right? Mm-hmm. What does it mean for you then, as a man who's an ally, at work and professional spaces, at home? What does all of this stuff mean to you? I mean, you're a father to our 3 girls. They love you. There's a way in which you treat them. I mean, I remember when we went into the toy shop and we saw the way that it's color-coded.
Girls aside, boys aside, makeup kids.
And we've literally decided that we are going to undermine this whole thing. We will find out who has God given us.
Yeah.
And let's serve them according to that. And we give them what they need to thrive, as opposed to what they're supposed to get according to the color codes. What are the practical things that you do as a father? That if you think about women in your office, for instance, you have an amazing team of women, right? So it's made there are lots of women in your team, and what does being an ally and a man who's an ally as a Christian man who's an ally mean for them? And I think you've reframed how you relate to me, so you don't have to go to that. But women in general and your children, what does that mean for you?
So, starting with you.
Okay.
But extending. But extending, obviously, to other women in my life.
Yeah.
I'm getting better at asking the question, what does it feel like to experience me?
Okay.
Not just to be only aware of my experience, but to be aware of how other people, other women, are encountering me. Am I somebody that people are happy, or they feel a sense of freedom, or am I a liberating force? Am I an empowering force? Am I somebody who makes way for people to thrive, with their gifts and their talents, their dreams? Am I somebody am I a door opener? Chivalry in that sense, in the Western sense, of being a door opener, but in terms of opportunities.
Okay.
Where my male privilege allows me to access to that door.
Yeah, and to be exceptional.
But where I know that I'm not actually the person who should be walking through that door.
Okay.
Can I open the door? Can I use my male privilege to open the door and let the right woman then walk in, walk through it? Can I be somebody that can save a life like Jesus did?
Come on.
You know, that woman that you spoke about.
Mm.
When I see how, you know, the system is against her. When there's a need, when I need to rebuke my brothers, that is, not to say to portray myself as a savior, but as a rebuker in that role. All of that, of course, is only possible if I start by asking myself the hard questions about what is it about my makeup, my socialization, that is problematic, that's part of the problem. Yeah. What is my relationship? So not just looking at the statistics, but asking myself, what's my relationship to these statistics?
Okay, that's very good.
You know, what role do I play in upholding them? When I find myself in my various spaces, is how do I articulate my own comfort in these spaces when I know that women are framed unjustly or like they have a negative experience? Why am I comfortable there? When I consider my relationship with these issues, why should it only matter when it's my wife and my sister and my this or my that?
Yeah.
You know, why can't it just matter because this is an injustice in the world? It starts with me asking these questions.
Sure.
It asks me why am I uncritical when it comes to the injustice, or am I as critical, I guess, when it comes to injustice, you know, against women, like you so passionately framed, Lusanda, when I would be if that same injustice was directed towards me.
You, yeah.
So it's a wanting to be like Jesus. That's in the way that people experience him, not like in an abstract way. This is my intention. Yes. This is my heart. This is no. How people actually
impact. You're talking about impact.
Yeah, how people
intention.
experience, right?
Yeah,
how people
absolutely.
experience. But then I say it's a work that starts internally, asking these questions, and of course coming full circle.
Come full circle. Well, I think that was really great because what you've done is that we first went into first you immersed a bit, looked at the story of what's happened, what is here, what do we see. We've spoken about male privilege and what the story is how it deals directly with your own life and some of your own personal challenges, and we've analyzed it. I think some of the most pertinent things for me will always be not just that analysis, but also how to allow it to bring us to action. And I think you've just brought us full circle so beautifully. Thank you so much, Mahlatse. This was a beautiful conversation.
I'm allowed to flirt. That's my wife on set.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sitting and coming full circle with us. Our conversation and growth as people of faith is ongoing, and so we'd love to keep journeying with you, our circle around family, seeing how we can keep our cycle of faith, action, and reflection continuing. So follow our Instagram accounts and join us next week as we continue circling around.